Commissioner, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Happy to be with you. It's a good opportunity to talk.
No, you don't get too many of these, I imagine, or you don't accept too many of these, Commissioner.
I don't accept too many, but it's someone else's job. Let's put it that way.
That's right. It is. So when did you first hear about the idea of the NFL Network?
Golly, probably 10 years before we launched. We launched in 2003. It was probably 1993 when we were having discussions with Fox about coming into the NFL, television package, and also the early discussions with DirecTV about the first satellite service. So, in those days, there was sort of general conversations about an NFL network. They weren't concrete, but it probably goes back that far.
10 years before. So what was the idea? Was it the same idea behind it, or were you looking at other networks to partner up with the NFL on that venture?
Well, it was more conceptual than concrete. It was obvious that the technology was changing with cable and and satellite television. I think the appearance of the satellite TV, which Neil Austrian, our league president, brought to us from his past experience with satellite services, I think that was a clear indication that technology was really going to evolve rapidly. Then, of course, the Internet came online. And but in those first 10 years, we really felt that executing was beyond our capacity. It was in the early 2000s that we really felt we had the brand strength, we had the programming diversity, and we could recruit the talent to launch a network. And so it was in the first 3 years probably of the new century that it became concrete rather than conceptual.
So this predated the joining of the NFL of the guy who I like to say was smart enough to have hired me twice, Steve Bornstein. So is that the case? Before Steve Bornstein even joined the NFL, you were having these conversations?
Yeah, we were having conversations, like you say, mostly driven by Neil Austrian, who was our league president, and other people internally. Even Val Pinchbeck, who was Mr. Traditional Broadcast Television, he was part of those conversations. But when Steve, when we had the opportunity to recruit Steve and bring him on board, it really went from being theory to reality, and it became not just reality, but it became an outstanding asset and service for the fans.
Yeah, Steve Bornstein, the former president of ABC Sports, and of course ESPN. We're talking to Commissioner Paul Tagliabue here on the Rich Eisen Show. So who were the key owners then? Who were the owners who were saying we need to do this, do you think?
Well, I think Pat Boland was out front, and probably Bob Kraft was right there with Pat. They were very instrumental in all of our television discussions at that time. And but Steve was the one who kind of brought it all together. Steve was adamant that we had to maintain control of the brand, that we could get into the business of distributing our own product, creating our own product. And so I think Steve and eventually Brian Rolap also were really instrumental working with Pat Boland, Bob Kraft, and myself in making this a reality.
Yeah, Brian Rolap was the current CEO of NFL Network right now. And Mr. Boland, you're remembering, you're recalling right there. I remember he was there at our first Thanksgiving game, the Broncos and the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. How crucial was bringing Thursday Night Football to NFL Network for the network's existence, even in its infancy, Commissioner?
Well, I think it was critical because you had to have some live programming, some games that were unique to the network. And we were having discussions at that time with NBC, and NBC does broadcast as well as cable. We were having discussions with Fox and Comcast. And each one of those networks made clear that they would have strong interest if there were live games, but the interest would be really diluted if there were not live games. So drawing on the Thanksgiving Day example, we felt Thursday night was the night to do that and to give the network some credibility with fans and to attract subscribers, frankly. So
was there any moment in time prior to the launch where my current version of myself would be nervous about how close it was to maybe not happening at all, Commissioner?
Well, I think that by the early 2000s, the question was not whether it would happen, but how it would happen. Would we do it on our own, or would we give a major equity piece, to one of those potential outstanding partners that I mentioned, NBC, Comcast, or Fox? And finally, the decision was made that we would be the equity owners. We would not have equity partners. We would collaborate And I think, a number of things were critical. We had NFL films. We were doing well with NFL.com. There was extraordinary popularity for the game, for the sport. And the technological landscape was highly innovative, rapidly changing, competitive, aggressive, global. And so you could see that the technology was something that you had to understand yourself, and also the technology was going to give you opportunity to have lots of potential partners.
Did you delegate everything to Steve Bornstein? And by that, I mean, were you the one who okayed the hiring of me, Commissioner Tagliabue, or was that Steve Bornstein who took that to you and I was the first choice? I'm just trying to find this out.
Well, I really don't remember, but since you worked out well, I'll take the credit, even though it's probably Steve's decision.
Yeah, I have the letter that you sent me welcoming me to the NFL Network on my wall here in the office, your handwritten note also, because I just gotten married to my wife, Susie, who filled in for me 2 weeks ago on this show. And it's just something that I can't believe it's been 11 years when I think about it.
Well, I can't either, and it's hard to believe you got 3 children, and you were once a young guy with a fancy freak.
Yes, with a lot more hair than I have right now. Do you miss at all being commissioner?
Well, I miss the game. I miss the fans. I miss the people. I don't miss the responsibilities and the 24/7 hours, 365 days a year. It's a grinding job. I was at it 17 years and 20 years as outside counsel before that, so I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing.
And so are you watching games on? Yeah, what are you doing essentially in that regard? Are you watching games Sundays?
Well, I'm on the boards of 3 different companies, one in Japan, one in Latin America, one in the U.S. I chair the board of directors at my alma mater, Georgetown University. Mm-hmm. And I do lots of other things with youth sports and, youth organizations in different communities, Washington, New York, and elsewhere around the country. So basically, I'm doing what I want to do, and I travel a lot with my wife, both around the U.S. and internationally. So I was at the Giants-Colts game last night.
Yeah.
And saw Michael Strahan and get his ring for the Hall of Fame, and that was reminiscent of trips that we took with Michael in Europe to visit with the troops after the outbreak of war in Iraq. So it was a very special evening in New Jersey, except for the outcome of the game for the Giants fans.
Yeah, interesting. I remember you told me when I first met you, the first assignment that I had technically was going with you to the reopening of Lambeau Field, or I guess the rechristening of the newly refurbished Lambeau Field, which still looks as beautiful as the day that I saw it in 2003. And I asked you, I said, you were a Redskins season ticket holder for so long. What happened when you became commissioner? Did you still root for him? Do you remember what the answer you told me was back then?
I don't remember.
You said you told me Pete Rozelle. You asked that of Commissioner Rozelle, who told you that now that you're commissioner, you have to root for every team that's losing. That's what you told me.
Well, that's a pretty good line. Rozelle was good with those kinds of observations.
I use that line every day because people ask me who
I'm
rooting for.
The other thing people say to me, it must be an extraordinary thing to go to games in 32 different stadiums with 32 different owners and different organizations, different experience every time you go. I say there are only 2 experiences. You either win, in which case it's a wedding, or the home team loses, in which case it's a funeral.
That's the way it goes. Hey, Commissioner, thanks for joining me. Thanks, as always, for all the support that you had for the network, for me and everyone who worked for it while you were Commissioner of the NFL. And I thank you for joining me here on this 11th anniversary of the network.
Well, thanks to you and everybody else who's made it so successful and such a great service for fans. Keep it up.
You bet. Thank you. That is Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, 17 years, 18 seasons at the helm of the National Football League here on The Rich Eisen Show.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.